China says that it's confident its fight against COVID-19 will succeed. The Foreign Ministry denying that frustrations against the country's strict protocol exist at all. This despite a weekend of anti-lockdown protests that stretched across the country. Security has been tightened in major cities to guard against any further outbreaks of civil disobedience.
COVID testing queues are back in operation. Beijing streets deserted again. Life is normal under China's harsh zero-COVID policy less than a day after the public's frustration astonishingly boiled over. The rallying cries for freedom. At least 1,000 people gathered in the capital, refusing calls to disperse. Many of them holding blank papers, a symbolic protest against censorship. But top of their demands, they want the government to ease up on harsh COVID measures. From east to west, these are some of the key regions hit by the sweeping wave of growing dissent. The city which pulled the trigger? Urumqi. That's the capital of the Xinjiang region, where an apartment fire claimed the lives of 10 people last week. It's a tragedy many have blamed on strict COVID curbs, an allegation officials have all but denied. The protests, the likes of which not seen in China since the pro-democracy rallies of 1989, have sent shockwaves around the country and around the world. This coming on the back of President Xi Jinping's triumphant return to the global stage in recent weeks after he secured an unprecedented third term in power. Authorities are addressing the unrest with a heavy hand. Several demonstrators were arrested following clashes with security forces, including a BBC reporter who was believed to have been held in custody and beaten by authorities.
上海已经有很多人被抓进去了，不只是昨天晚上，他们是为了大家，是为了所有人，是为了每一个骑手不被封在家里，为了大家能够吃上药，能够吃上饭。我们应该声援这些更勇敢的人。上海放人！上海放人！
中国难道连自己国家的国歌，难道连自己党每次开会都要唱的党歌、国际歌都要封锁、都要封禁、都要因为唱这个歌而被抓走吗？
The public fear further lockdowns as the country's COVID-19 tally spikes to another record. The daily number of new cases breaching the 40,000 mark for the first time in the pandemic.
CNA correspondents Lo Min and Deborah Wong are standing by with the latest. Let's start things off with Min. Min, those protests, they appear to have cooled, but authorities are looking to be bracing for more demonstrations over the next few days.
Well, it's hard to tell how quickly the protests could fizzle out over the next few days. Judging from the situation in downtown Shanghai today, the crowds were much smaller than over the weekend, and there was heavy police presence. Police cars lining the roads, and every 20 to 30 steps you would pass by police patrolling the area, stopping passers-by who are filming with their mobile phones and forcing people to delete photos. Those who refuse to do so could be seen taken away into police cars, and it's not clear how willing people would be to continue pounding the streets after this. State media has so far refrained from covering the protests over the weekend, but the Foreign Ministry has responded to journalists' questions today and denied that there is frustration towards China's COVID-19 protocol.
你谈到的有关情况与事实不符。 中方一贯根据动态清零的总方针，根据现实的情况，一直在进行有关的调整。
Xinjiang authorities appear to be responding to public outcry over the weekend, announcing that they would lift some measures, including allowing public transport and some essential businesses to gradually resume starting today in low-risk areas. That's after many parts of Xinjiang has been under lockdown for over 100 days. Now, experts say that President Xi is unlikely to tolerate dissent for very long, and he could rely on the armed forces to quash protesters if things get out of hand.
Thanks, Min Min. Lo Min Min speaking to us there.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong is holding a vigil for victims of the pandemic. More than 10,000 people in Hong Kong have died from the virus. The city has reported around 2.1 million infections to date. Like mainland China, Hong Kong has been under strict virus restrictions, although it has eased measures in the past few months. Deborah Wong joins us live from Hong Kong's Central Station with more. Deborah, how are authorities dealing with the gathered crowds, given that the vigil comes on the back of those protests in China?
Well, I'm at the heart of Central at the moment, and this is a busy financial district, especially during the peak evening rush hour. At about 6:45 p.m., people started gathering here. Right now, they've already dispersed, The vigil ended just minutes before we went live. But earlier on, we saw a lot of participants, especially people from mainland China. They were here just right behind me. They were holding up signs calling for support of victims of the Urumqi fire, victims of strict lockdowns in China. Some of them were also holding up blank pieces of paper, as what we've seen in China, which symbolize unhappiness regarding censorship as well as the lack of internet freedoms. Also, there were a lot of people scattered around. If you can see behind me right now, there's a little crowd that's gathering there. There are people holding flowers. There are also people holding candles. Now, I want to point this out because vigils are a rare sight in Hong Kong at the moment because of ever since the Beijing-imposed national security law came into effect. Now, we were expecting a very intense police presence, so we were here at about 6:30 to just keep an eye out. Hardly any police were here, but they only started turning up at about 6:45 or so. Some of them came, and surprisingly, no enforcement action was taken. In fact, if you see right here, police actually set up barricades to allow participants to pay their respects. There are flowers all around here. There are blank pieces of paper here. So this is actually a very rare sight. There was no enforcement action, which is quite surprising. And in the last 2 days, there were some vigils also organized by students across at least 3 Hong Kong universities, and they were also calling for the same thing in support of vigils. There is something happening at the moment. As you can see, there's some commotion happening. Police have now, as you can see, police have now started to do more crowd control. Let's go a bit nearer to check the situation out. So police right now are calling for the crowd to disperse. They are chasing the media away. They've held a guy. Okay. So there's some action happening at the moment. This is very different from the very peaceful vigil that we saw just a couple of minutes ago. All right, so back to the vigil. Protests are very rare in Hong Kong at the moment ever since the Beijing-imposed national security law came into effect. So again, no enforcement action has been taken on the participants who have appeared for the vigil. We will find out more on what just happened here earlier, and we'll come back to you for more updates.
All right, Deborah, we will await your update. Deborah Wong is giving us a taste on those developing events from Hong Kong's Central Station.
Well, Beijing's reaction to the protests over the weekend is drawing criticism from around the world. A vigil held in Tokyo for victims of the Urumqi fire in China turned into a protest against Chinese leadership and its COVID-19 curbs. Around 100 people gathered at the Shinjuku railway station in the Japanese capital, calling for Chinese President Xi Jinping to step down. Local media reports say that the protesters were mostly people in their 20s and 30s from China. Protests also in London. A large crowd of people gathered outside the Chinese embassy late last night in solidarity with the demonstrators in China. British Business Minister Grant Shapps has meanwhile condemned Chinese police actions as unacceptable and concerning. That's after the BBC said that one of its journalists was arrested and beaten while covering the protests in Shanghai.